Did you know that each year over 800,000 men, women, and children worldwide choose suicide as a means to silence their emotional, mental, and physical pain? New Jersey has an estimated population of 9 million. That's also the number of children who face risk factors that may hinder their ability to become productive, thriving adults. 403,000. That's the number of children as of 2014 in the United States foster care program. Many of these children will wonder most of their lives with an underlying question: why wasn't I good enough? Loss is what we experience. Grief is what we feel. We grieve losses of safety, trust, and security, among others. Our losses affect our day-to-day lives and our future. We go through the motions, armoring up, numbing out, pretending things are okay, but always looking for our next feel-good fix. It's really an uncomfortable, yet comfortable, or uncomfortably uncomfortable cycle, and it's vicious. I know because I was once the poster child for this unresolved grief. I did not do this or live this way intentionally. I lived this way because I didn't know how to connect the dots to healthy, like many folks. And I certainly had no idea that I held the key. Willingness, awareness, self-care, communication, forgiveness, and releasing. These are the keys to discovering the gifts in your grief. I want to share with you a snippet, what I call a living loss. This is a little bit about my life, and some of you may recognize some of this that resonates with your own life. As a young child, my parents survived an oh-so-bitter divorce. And for the sake of time today, I'm simply going to refer to my childhood as the textured years, most of which I struggled with self-love and acceptance. I was raped at 19, and I dropped out of college the first time around because the thought of public speaking paralyzed me. It's true. I chose to abandon my dreams rather than be judged, or at least think I was being judged. Over the next several years, I wrestled passively with my grief gremlins. Sometimes I thought I won, other times I knew I didn't. So let's skip ahead a couple of decades. Les and I married the summer of 2004. I had just turned 40. 2 days after our honeymoon, he went in for a physical. 3 days later, we sat in his doctor's office and were told that he had stage 4 colon cancer. Now, anyone that's found themselves on the receiving end of this kind of news is painfully aware of how quickly the air is sucked out of the room as your mind tries to make sense of what's just been laid at your feet. Our reality was that our happily ever after had just taken an unexpected and seemingly cruel turn. I never will forget the first chemo treatment. We acted as if it were any other day, but I can assure you it was anything but. The nurse came in to prep Les, and as she's making small talk about the current events and weather and whatnot, my eye spies a tray of donuts across from the nurse's station. And I am not going to lie, I would have given anything to have ran across the room and nosedive right into that tray and gobbling up 1, 2, on this particular day, maybe even 3 donuts. But that was not going to numb me enough or change the reason why we were there. So as she began the process of the treatment, I sat there wanting to cry, but feeling like I needed to be strong because that's what I had always been taught, be strong. I watched that chemo drip from the bag into the IV tube, and I followed it, every twist and turn, and then it happened. It disappeared into the port that had been placed under the skin on Les's chest. I knew that moment was the beginning to our end. The fact was, we began our life together preparing for him to die, and 17 months later, he did. But it's what we did with the in-between that changed everything. You see, we had a choice. We could be swallowed up by diagnosis and fear, or be willing to lean into this new normal for us. Be willing to live from love even when it was uncomfortable. This willingness brought us to an awareness of our old individual wounds, some that had guided most of our lives that we didn't even remember. This shifted us into self-care, where we were able to verbalize what we needed individually, but also set healthy boundaries for ourselves individually and as a couple. Were there days of mass chaos, overwhelming pain, anger? Absolutely. We're human. We led into communication, and communication afforded us a clarity which guided our next right steps. Forgiveness and releasing allowed us to let go of the old pains, resentments, anger that had been guiding us, some since childhood. We were able to live with ease despite our circumstance at hand. When Les took his final breath, I knew in that moment, albeit abbreviated, he and I really did have a rich, full life. That was a gift in my grief that has forever changed the course of my life. And I'm forever grateful for that. That other shoe that we're always talking about that's going to drop, it's going to drop. And it's probably going to drop when you least expect it. The good news is you get to choose whether or not it hits like a steel-toe boot or like a flip-flop. A beautiful example of this is L.T. Kirk's talk, which you're going to hear shortly, titled How Heart Failure Brought Me Back to Life. This is L.T.'s deeply profound account of choosing to live with gratitude and fully despite circumstance. You see, when we shift our perception of grief, we prohibit guilt, shame, and fear of being vulnerable from controlling our lives. And when we do that, we're able to reclaim our lives. These steps allow us to recognize our grief. They allow us to live from a place of power. Brene Brown mentioned in her TEDx Houston talk the power of vulnerability, of the totality that shame-based emotions take on us, individually and collectively as a society. This has left our society functioning from a place of a deficit. We rely on emotional Band-Aids. By a show of hands, how many of you have ever heard in your life or said in your life any of the following? Eat something, you'll feel better. Don't cry, you need to be strong. Crying is a sign of weakness, right? These are all futile attempts to deal with or numb from our pain. The reality is, when we ignore our pain, we set ourselves on a direct path with what I call gremlin sedatives. An example of these are drugs, sex, alcohol, shopping, toxic relationships, and food. The tray of donuts. They will not take away, they will not numb our pain. That's up to us. Is it always easy? No, it's not. But these next steps line us up for a rich, full life. My Saturdays are spent volunteering at Riverbend, an all-male maximum security prison in Nashville. I teach components of my program, Transcending Turbulence. These classes are not mandatory. These gentlemen show up because they are choosing their next right steps in their life. The reality is some of these guys are going to make parole someday. Other ones are going to take their final breath behind the steel door and the razor wire. But the reality is all of them and all of us are deserving of peace of mind and clarity. Rather than try to articulate what this means to my guys, I wanted to share with you from one of them, and I'll simply call him Q. I never knew what grief was or how pain controlled me. I never stopped to think how I might be hurting myself or others in life. This work has allowed me to realize that a lifetime of running from my pain has left me angry and making some pretty bad choices. Choices which have had consequences which have resulted in my being incarcerated. By reevaluating my beliefs and my actions, I've leaned into a different perspective. I'm learning healthy ways now to communicate and to respond. I'm letting go of stuff that has kept me messed up emotionally for much of my life. Life makes more sense to me now. My circumstances don't define me. And whether I make parole or not, I know that I can choose to live with peace and clarity every day. You see, Q and many others behind the wall and out here in what we call the free world are choosing to transcend the turbulence in their life by choosing to lean into a new normal, despite circumstances, life experiences, or situations. Willingness to shift, awareness of your grief, stepping into your self-care, authentic communication, and forgiveness of the people, memories, stories, and personal behaviors. I invite you to lean into the gift of grieving. Whether you choose to take a huge leap forward or whether you choose to take baby steps, the choice is yours. But take this with you today and hold it dear to your heart because it can change your life. This truth that things do not happen to you, they happen for you. And embracing this can lead you to the key that will unlock your invisible shackles and allow you to live from love even when it is the most painful. Thank you.